Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to Friday Night Fusion on 93.5 Unity FM, Birmingham 105.1, Inspire FM, Luton 107.8, Radio Ikhlas, Derby, Radio Asian Fever in Leeds, and our other many media partners up and down the country. Alhamdulillah, with your du'as and with your support, Friday Night Fusion is now the largest current affairs program on UK community radio. And as you know, we are here each and every week giving you the very latest in local, national and even international news, lively debates and interesting discussions. And today's program, we start off with an internationally renowned scholar, somebody who has spoken about Islam, its importance in our lives and also its role as part of a wider society. Brother Nouman Ali Khan joins me on the line live from the United States. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nouman Ali Khan. Jazakallah khair for giving up your valuable time to be with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Now, we have spoken to you on a number of occasions, mashallah. We've been honored to have you on our program, and I believe that your love for the United Kingdom and for the people of the United Kingdom has very much manifested into a reality. You are coming to the UK very soon. How did this particular tour come about?
Well, alhamdulillah, good friendships were made last time I came to the UK, and I somehow convinced my wife after Hajj. I figured that was the right time. The heart was soft to have another trip, this time a shorter one, inshallah ta'ala, to the UK. My intentions for coming this time were to help share the vision I have long term for what I'd like to be able to do for Bayina, what Bayina can do for Muslims, inshallah ta'ala. And I wanted to, at least share the excitement I have for that message with the larger audience, and not just to make the announcement, but also, give a little bit of a glimpse of the kinds of things I and my colleagues are trying to put together here in the U.S. for the benefit of Muslims at large. So inshallah, this time I'm just doing shorter programs in order to be able to, go to see more locations and meet more people, inshallah. So there's a couple of short programs in London, and then I'm coming over to Birmingham, where you are, I believe, inshallah. And then finally I'll make a stop in Glasgow before I head back, bismillah ta'ala.
Inshallah, mashallah, absolutely fantastic, and we all are certainly very much looking forward to welcoming you here to the UK very soon, inshallah. How important do you think, Brother Nouman Ali Khan, international links between Muslim communities are in terms of spreading the message of Islam and its wider message of love, peace and harmony?
I don't just think they're important, I think they're critical. I happen to think that we're living in a time now where, subhanAllah, people that excel in different areas are able to put their expertise and the best of their efforts online and make those resources available for the benefit of others. And, I personally experienced that in at least the limited work that I do, and how actually the majority of the consumers of our tafsir and our Arabic courses and whatever resources we have, the vast majority of them are actually abroad. They're outside of the U.S. Even though, alhamdulillah, we have a huge following in the United States, it opened my eyes to the fact that this is really a global kind of work. And the opportunity for synergy and the opportunity for sharing, perspectives from people, across the world, it really opens up the scope for Islamic work in several directions, in several areas. At least I see that in my own area, subhanAllah, in the area of Quranic studies and Arabic studies. The kinds of scholars and researchers that I've gotten to meet as I've traveled outside, even in my limited travels, has given me new appreciation for the value of this kind of linking and, connectivity, inshallah.
Inshallah. Now, what do you think from the perspective of someone like yourself, alhamdulillah, very well read in the affairs of the faith, and also what we as people of Islam should be doing, what our obligations are? What do you think the United Kingdom and we the people of the United Kingdom can offer to this pivotal process of progression and raising awareness, especially in a time of great propaganda, some may say, in the mainstream media at the moment about Islam, Muslims and what we really stand for?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to say to that. The first of them is that our biggest contribution to the ummah is to produce people, and it's to produce youth of caliber, of character, of vision, of resolve. And that's, the Ummah feels, every time we talk about the Ummah, it feels like we're talking about something that's in a state of depression and constant decline. And that entire attitude is going to shift when we have really optimistic, driven, well put together, balanced youth that are going to say, we're going to turn the tides. And we're going to turn, this Ummah is going to look very different in just this next decade than it did 10 years ago. And they have that optimism to them that drives them. And there's no reason not to be optimistic. We have Allah on our side, So, but really, to me, institutions that we build around the idea of producing people of caliber, that's the first priority. And I see a lot of youth energy in the UK. I really do. I mean, the last time I came, I was actually in shock at the amount of enthusiasm and, zeal that young people have in wanting to learn the religion, how seriously committed they are despite being in a Western society that has its own, attractions and challenges. So I am very moved by that, and I think there's a lot of great opportunity there. But the danger there is, when youth are driven in the religious sense, in the spiritual sense, then they can be distracted and pulled in some fragmented directions where they end up using the best of their energies in infighting and in insignificant issues and in things that don't really help make the world a better place. And that's where the vision and proper institutions are going to help, inshallah ta'ala. So that's really one thing where I feel the UK has a colossal opportunity. The other thing that I personally noticed about the UK was, because of your physical proximity to the Muslim world, to most of the Muslim world, to the Arab world, to Southeast Asia, and because of the concentrated population you have there, there's actually a lot more interaction between high levels of Islamic scholarship and the Muslim scholars and leaders that are there in the UK, much more than I see in the United States. I mean, we have ulama here, but traveling from here to the Arab world and to Asia, etc., is much more difficult, and it's much less frequent. So we feel that disconnect somewhat in our work here. But there, even the scholars I met, there was a lot more interaction, it seems to me, on the ilm side, on the knowledge and learning and scholarship side.
Yes.
I feel we've gotten a little further than the Muslims in the UK and the US. We've made some progress ahead of them in community development and infrastructure. I think we've done some great things on that end. And I see that when I saw at least my observations of the London community, at least, it's getting there, but it's still maybe 10, 15, 20 years behind what we've been able to do in some good examples in the United States.
Sure.
But as far as scholarship, I think you guys are sitting on a gold mine. You really, really are.
Mashallah.
And you could really, there's an opportunity to produce world caliber scholars and activists out of the young generation coming from the UK. There's really that kind of opportunity there.
Mashallah, Birmingham, right here where we are speaking to you from right now, is a city that is honored to have the largest population of young people than any other city in Europe. And many of our listeners often write in on a regular basis and talk about yourself, Brother Nouman Ali Khan, and how you are an inspiration to them. You're somebody who has very much spent a lot of time in a Western country, in the United States, but you have become a very admirable scholar that young people can not only listen to and learn from, but also look up to as an individual, mashallah. And I suppose that part of that process is creating more role models like yourself, perhaps here on a national scale in the United Kingdom. One of the biggest concerns that young people point out on a regular basis, and our listeners as a whole in fact, is the fact that they don't think our mosques are performing the function they should perform. Perhaps this idea that there needs to be more going on in our mosques, they need to be a hub for our community. Is this currently taking place in the United States? And if so, what can we do to enhance the function of our masajids here in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, I can tell you that the masjid feel in the UK that I got a sense of felt a lot like back home. And the masjid feel in the United States is very different from that. It doesn't feel like back home. Actually, when Muslims set up in places like where I am, I don't know if 30 years ago you could have imagined Muslims living in good old Texas, So, but I live in Texas now. In our masjid, alhamdulillah, we have about 300-400 people at Fajr every morning.
MashaAllah.
So subhanAllah, it's a fantastic place. But the vision that drove building some of the most successful communities in the United States was that we're going to make this place for the family. This is a place where our families will find solace, and they're going to connect with each other. So there's going to be fantastic, communal spaces for women. There are going to be excellent sports activities and social activities for children. And there's going to be plenty of learning and social activities for men. So addressing each segment of the family. So if there's a car full of husband, wife, and children coming to the masjid, each one of them have something productive to do at the masjid. It's not just a place of prayer. It's a place where they feel a sense of belonging. And that vision has driven some of what I see is really fantastic masajid scenes. This is not the kind of scene you would see typically associated with a masjid. And as a result of that, at least the example I'm giving you of our local masjid, the Irving Masjid, people actually started buying real estate around the masjid and buying homes there so they can walk to the masjid, so their children can walk to the masjid for salawat. And so a good chunk of our congregation is actually children. And that's a big deal. And I think even, subhanAllah, that in the musalla, how you could easily think, well, children in the masjid is going to make a lot of noise, it's going to be disruption,
yes,
what about that problem, right? So they thought ahead, and they made 2 musallas for women. They made a musalla, elaborate musalla for women with children, and another for women without children, soundproof. They made a musalla for men with kids, and another, like side-by-side, glass covered, so they can be part of the congregation, and we don't have to hear the circus going on in there, for the men that do come with younger children.
MashaAllah.
In the masjid. So it's thinking ahead of how to cater to more and more and more people. That's just even on the infrastructure side. So that's one thing definitely that I think you guys have the numbers there and enough of a young generation there that wants change to be able to bring about these kinds of things without causing too much of an uproar in the community. And that's the other thing that's important to note here. When things are going a certain way for a long time, talking about change can be very difficult.
Yes,
because, when people are set in their ways, then it's hard to bring up something new without making it feel like we're selling out on our values or this is not how things are supposed to be, etc., But the fact of the matter is, if my kids don't feel, and if my wife and my young cousins don't feel comfortable in the masjid, and they don't feel like this is a place where they can go to be themselves, what other space do we have as Muslims where we can be ourselves and not compromise our deen and actually find reinforcement for our values? Is that going to be, at school? Is it going to be in college? Is that going to be in the workplace? Because those places constantly challenge our values, and we don't find people that share those values with us in those spaces. So we need some space where, people of common value get together and find strength in each other, and that's really the role that masjid needs to be playing. And that will be, inshallah, the evolution of the masajid, maybe even, inshallah ta'ala, across the world.
Inshallah, inshallah. Now, obviously, here in the United Kingdom, we are blessed to have a very large Muslim community, a community that is growing day by day, alhamdulillah. So a lot of people may find it a massive shame and a great failure, perhaps, on our part as British Muslims, that we haven't managed to turn our masajids into the places they were always supposed to be, a hub for the community, a hub for Muslims where Muslims can learn to be great human beings, can access all different types of facilities. Whereas if people look at the United States, you often associate that to a smaller Muslim community, to the one that we have here in the UK. Why do you think that actually in the US you've been able to move forward with such an element of innovation with what some have perceived as a smaller Muslim community, whereas here in the UK, where we have a large Muslim community concentrated together in many places like Bradford, Birmingham, etc., we haven't been able to do that?
Well, let me just be honest with you first. We've got plenty of terrible examples in the United States. And there's plenty of those. But I mean, what gives me optimism is that good examples do exist outside of theoretical discourse, right? So that's what motivates me. I spent most of my adult life in New York City, which is actually very similar to London. When I came to London, it was almost deja vu for me. So, and I can, to sum it up, really, in bigger cities and in bigger populations, especially older populations, one of the great problems of Muslims when they commune together is we haven't actually consciously made a distinction between establishing community as opposed to establishing cult. And I use the word carefully. Cults are by definition, groups that want to reinforce certain practices and certain appearances into their following, and they don't allow for any form of diversity outside of that. Discussion is not allowed. Diversity is not allowed. Differing opinions aren't allowed, and uniformity is enforced. Right? The difficult thing to acknowledge in the West is that Muslims are not monolithic. There are people of all different kinds of backgrounds. Some very religious backgrounds. Some not very religious at all. They're going to be people of different understandings, and they're all, in the United States at least, because of the less numbers we have, we were kind of forced to share the masjid space. We didn't have the convenience of picking up and going somewhere else.
Yes.
And so we had to learn to work with each other, and to work without, letting each other coexist. This didn't happen as well in a city like New York because there are lots of options. You can have a little musalla over there, a little masjid over there, so it was more of a cultish thing, almost, in New York. Every group had its own little thing. But in bigger states where Muslims moved as an even smaller minority, we have actually larger masajid and a bigger concentration of diversity. So to give you an example, and this sounds crazy actually in many parts of the Muslim world, in Dallas, in the city of Dallas, which is a fairly decent-sized Muslim community, we have maybe 7 or 8 major Islamic centers. All the imams of all the Islamic centers are close friends with each other, and even though they belong to different schools of thought, to put it lightly, they hang out with each other. They'll play sports with each other, go to dinner with each other.
MashaAllah.
In the masjid that I go to, there's one night for like a tablighi halaqa. I do a tafsir session. Another sheikh does a fiqh session. Another sheikh from a completely different following does a aqidah session. The Turks, a group of Turks, have their own halaqat in there. The Indonesians have their halaqat in there. There are different relief organizations that work in there. People that see things very, very differently officially from each other are all sharing the same masjid space and love each other.
Wow, very good.
They get along totally fine, and nobody's trying to indoctrinate anybody else into their line. It's a live and let live within the Muslim space. That's something we haven't learned, and that's something that it's going to take a lot of work from the coming generation to do. And let me close this before I take your next question with: young people easily get disenfranchised from the masjid when they see the gloomy state it's in. And then they decide that they're going to basically experience their Islam maybe on YouTube and maybe at some hookah shop or something and hang out somewhere else. The masjid is just not the place for them anymore, right? I think that's one of the fatal mistakes. We have to engage. The masjid is still the house of Allah, and even if it's under the control of people who don't see things the way we do, we won't bring about change until we're an active and a positive part of it. And change won't come overnight. We have to be really significantly involved, helping out, and when we become, inseparable assets to our masajid, then we're slowly able to bring about reform into our communities. But from the outside, the critical attitude, which is so easy to do, and I would argue, being Pakistani, I inherited it, being critical of all things around you and not really doing much about it. That attitude doesn't bring about change. It just brings about gup-shup for chai. That's what that brings about.
Most definitely. And I think a lot of people out there, specifically our youngsters, will be very much empowered by your words, because this is a sense that we get regularly from our younger listeners saying, how do we break into the masajid structure? How do we ensure that we can help to improve it under the guidance of our elders? Now, alhamdulillah, a lot of people will be very much happy about the fact that you are coming over here to the UK. Evidently you understand the issues that exist and certainly have looked at it quite closely, and I suppose helping us as a British Muslim community to progress, to advance, to develop, and to get rid of some of our regressive conservative attitudes is something that you're more than happy to help us with when you come over to the UK.
I'm open to discussion. I personally think, alhamdulillah, because of the advent of the internet, podcasts, YouTube, there's no shortage of lectures now. What the ummah needs now is discussion. What we really, really need is just sit down and talk issues out and really work, on the ground to solve them. Like, if a young Muslim says, I want to make my life a service to Islam, He should be able to think, or she should be able to think a little more creatively than I'm going to be the imam of a masjid, or I'm going to be a speaker at a convention. There are more services to provide for this ummah. Let's talk them out. Let's figure out directions for our young people, because they need to do that. We need them to provide services, to take this deen further in every direction. That's what I feel. Even the better progressing masajid push the importance of ilm. Even though I would be like a really big advocate of ilm, I think ilm should transform into some kind of service. Why are you learning? Learning for the sake of learning isn't a goal. Learning for the sake of serving, not just Allah, but by serving Allah, serving humanity in some significant way. That should be a driver underneath all of our learning, And so we can even, in the evolved masjid culture, we can actually transform the very definition and the goals of learning Islam itself. So people are going to learn Islam to become social workers. They're going to learn Islam to become, historians that improve the sense of identity of Muslims, so they understand their history better. They're always thinking of some kind of service, some way of improving Muslims, either spiritually, intellectually, socially, in a communal sense, in some way,
Yes, mashallah, and of course the best from amongst us are those who are of benefit to others, and I suppose when we talk about others, we're talking about Muslims and non-Muslims alike, very much Muslims being ambassadors for Islam, but also helping others in our community. And that is how I would imagine we're going to get more and more people wanting to look into Islam, rather than being absolutely repulsed by the image of Islam that the media portrays.
Yeah, I'll tell you something interesting. I had a church group come and speak to me, and I was responsible to introduce them to Islam and have some conversations with them. And of course, Texas, Republican state, very, very much right-wing. An average church group has some very understandably negative views about Islam, and they think that Muslims are out to just topple the government and this and that. So I had an interesting conversation with them, and I introduced myself as a student and teacher of the Quran. That's how I introduced myself, right? And they're like, well, how can you believe in the Quran and be patriotic, or how can you love your country or want good for others if you believe in the Quran and you're obligated in your Quran to fight us and hate us and et cetera, et cetera. And my response to them was detailed but honest. And I said essentially that my faith drives me, it obligates me to be of service to those around me. And my biggest service, I feel, is that I'm going to teach this book, because when people start genuinely learning this book, they are going to become of service to others around them. It is going to force them to do that. This is my service to humanity, not just to this country, but to humanity, is to teach this book properly, as best I can. Even that is my goal, is not just to have people learn, but to become better people by Allah's permission. And that's what I want my children to be. I want them to think about how are they going to become better human beings.
Now, when we look at the United Kingdom as a country, it is very, very diverse. Obviously, Muslims are a significant part of it, but we also have very negative realities as well for our own Muslim community that we have to face. I don't know whether the situation is similar in the US, but certainly in the UK, many of our young Muslim children suffer from very low levels of academic attainment at school. The prison population is around 11 to 12% Muslim, whereas Muslims only make up 1 to 2% of the total population. It seems that a lot of our young people in particular have become very disconnected from their faith, and as well as being very disconnected from the systems that exist here in this country, i.e. not finding education as the way to go. How do you think issues like this can actually be realistically addressed?
I'm happy to say, alhamdulillah, we don't have that problem. Muslims represent probably the higher bracket of educated people in the country, and the higher income bracket here in the United States also. Our kids have the highest averages of, finishing high school and finishing college and joining the workforce. My contention is actually quite different about the Muslim youth in America. I feel like because they come from Arab, so many of them come from Arab or Desi backgrounds, that the career choices they have are so limited in creativity that the greatest thing you can do is either become a doctor or, an engineer or whatever. And like within one or two fields of expertise. Outside of that, you're basically useless and you didn't accomplish anything with your life. So we need to step out of that. For us, the Muslims here, need to think more creatively. But in the UK, that is a big problem. And one of the things that has to be instilled by means of our faith is this concept of ihsan. You know, إِذَا عَمِلَ عَمَلًا فَلْيُتْقِنْهُ. When the believer does anything, then let him be perfect in it. Let him excel in it. And this idea that Muslims have to hold themselves to a higher standard than anybody else. Whether you're sitting in math class, mathematics, I apologize. So, mathematics, or you're sitting in a fiqh class, it doesn't matter. You have to be top of the class. When you're going to work, you have to be the best employee. You can't be the slacker. You have to be the one that shows up on time and leaves on time and takes a break for 20 minutes and not 21. You know, that's the attitude of perfection and excellence. That will speak about Islam more than any other da'wah. The Muslims in England are such a huge population that if they had their act together, they wouldn't have to do da'wah. Their face would be da'wah, their community would be da'wah, their masjid itself would be da'wah, their presence in an organization or at a college or at a school would be da'wah by itself. The police commissioner came to one of our masajid in New York soon after 9/11, and he gave a talk at the masjid. And he said, we have no problems with the Muslim community. I've been working in this town for 20 years. I've never pulled over a Muslim that was drunk. I've never arrested a Muslim for robbing a store. I've never even pulled over a Muslim for speeding. If everybody would be like you, I would be out of a job. We wouldn't need the police in this town. You know, that's just his observation of Muslims in his community.
Subhanallah.
You know, so that's to us. Not drinking is not an accomplishment. Not speeding or running red lights or robbing stores. I don't pat my children on the back and say, MashaAllah, today you didn't rob any stores. It's not an accomplishment for us, right? But the world has such low expectations of humanity that even if we met the bare minimum requirements of Islam, we would be far above the fray. We would just stick out. We would be so obvious that these people are special, they're different.
True.
They're not like everybody else.
Very true, very true. Now, we do really appreciate your time today, Brother Nouman Ali Khan, and some of the words of wisdom that you have shared with us in terms of your understanding of the British Muslim community and what we can do here in the UK have proven to be truly invaluable for our listeners, I'm sure, because we regularly play your lectures here on Unity FM. People hear about you talking regarding general topics, but when you're talking directly to us as a community here in the UK and comparing it to perhaps the United States, a country that not a lot of us British people often travel to or hear about, apart from if it's in the media, it's very good to have an American Muslim as well coming on to share a few pieces of advice with us. Now, finally, if our brothers and sisters out there, and I'm sure they will want to come down to visit you on your tour of the UK, is there any website that they can visit to find out more information, inshallah?
Yeah, easiest thing to do is to follow my Twitter, which is Nouman Bayyina, one word, Nouman, and then Bayyina, Bayyinah. I've posted some details about my trip there. Another thing you can do is just go to bayyina.com, inshallah, and just click on the student center, and you'll see seminars listed. But those are seminars, you know, the ones that are taking place here in the U.S., Canada, and also you guys. So it's a longer list. Specifically, at least the community that's listening to this radio broadcast, inshallah, my salam to all of them, and also an invitation on the 29th, which is Saturday. I'll be giving a dars on Surah Al-Rahman at the Rec Center in Birmingham from 5 to 10 p.m. That's, again, the 29th on Saturday. And for details, again, just, you know, you can go to my Twitter or just go to bayyina.com, and you should be able to find it without a difficulty.
Inshallah. Please do make sure you pop down to the Unity FM studios as well when you're around. If you get a moment, you're more than welcome to come down here, inshallah, and meet the team. And we've got to take you to some of our wonderful restaurants here in Birmingham. It's the curry capital of the UK and possibly of Europe.
Good desi food. Yeah, my opinion of your people will depend on the restaurant I go to.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Brother Nouman Ali Khan, Jazakallah khair for joining us on Friday Night Fusion, inshallah.
Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, brother. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.